Hi, I'm Karan Thapar. Over the last few years, I hope you've been watching my program, The Interview on the Wire. During that period, I've interviewed doctors, politicians, businessmen, scientists, authors, and even the occasional Nobel laureate. For me, it's been exciting. I hope it's been enjoyable for you. But these, as you know, are tough times, and if this program is going to remain bold, independent, and sometimes even defiant, then I think we need your support. At the end of the day, it's a truism, but editorial independence is best defended by the viewers. So if you would like this program to remain the way it is, forthright, outspoken, and interesting, then would you consider supporting us? All you have to do is to click on the description at the bottom. But more than anything else, I hope you will continue to watch the interview. Your viewership means an awful lot to me. Hello and welcome to a special interview for The Wire. As the Israel-Hamas conflict enters its 14th day, completing 2 weeks, we ask, do we know the truth about Hamas? And when we find out, will it surprise us or will it confirm the worst? Joining me to answer that question is one of the world's most highly regarded authorities on Hamas. She's the author of this book. Here it is, Hamas from Resistance to Regime. She's also the author of a seminal book on Jerusalem, called Jerusalem Without God, Portrait of a Cruel City. Joining me now from Amman in Jordan is Paola Caridi. Paola Caridi, forgive me if my questions seem basic and even at times rudimentary, but in India, we know very little about Hamas. So can I start by asking, how would you characterize or describe this organization?
First of all, let me thank you for inviting me. I hope I can describe a movement that is older, almost 40 years old. So it has different phases and times and changes. Let's try to understand the roots. It has been created inside Palestine in 1987 formally, but the discussion inside the Islamist panorama started some years before. So I think it's really 40 years of time. The roots are inside the Muslim Brotherhood. And when I say the Muslim Brotherhood, I don't say only the Palestinian one, but the regional one. The Muslim Brotherhood started more than almost a century ago in Egypt and spreaded along the coast and around the region. And the Palestinian Muslim Brotherhood was one of the national parts of the regional movement. What, for example, the Hamas people told me was not all the Muslim brothers are Hamas, but all the Hamas funders are Muslim brothers. So it means that the link is very, very, very close.
Please, carry on, please carry on.
No, please.
I was going to say, this is therefore an organization whose roots go back 40 years. It has close connections with the Muslim Brotherhood. And you said it's gone through different phases. At different times, it's been different. Now, at the moment, most governments and media organizations call Hamas a terrorist organization. From your perception of Hamas and from the research you've done, would it be correct to say it's a terrorist organization? Or is that a mistaken view? Or only partially correct?
Partially correct. It started as a political movement, as the political branch of the Muslim Brothers, of the Palestinian Muslim Brothers, and they used the terrorist tools along the years, especially from 1994 till 2005, when they decided to pause the suicide attacks. And if you remember, especially at the beginning of the year 2000, during the second Intifada, there were attacks, terrorist attacks on the Israeli bases inside the Israeli cities in Jerusalem, targeting the civilian population. So as far as we understand, not only as analysts, but as human beings, those were terrorist tools. So it is partially true. And the same for what they've done on the 7th of October, when 1,200 men from the Al-Qassam brigades went into the Israeli territory, and there was a massacre. 1,400 people massacred. Very few were militaries, were soldiers, and almost 4,000 wounded and 200 hostages. So the political movement, we have to underline, has a military wing. So Hamas is divided into a political wing and a military one. Of course, they are connected, but as far as we know as analysts, the military wing is separated for the political branch, especially when they decide the tools they will use. So the political branch gives the direction, the political direction. The decision has a very particular decisional process, and then the military branch will follow the orders, but they will decide the kind of tool they will use.
So if I understand correctly, you're saying Hamas is a political movement with a political branch and a military branch. The political branch gives the orders and the direction, but the military branch decides how it will be implemented and what tools they will use. And the military branch is the branch that indulges in terrorism.
Yes, but of course there is a decisional process. And if the political branch decides that the suicide attacks, for example, at the beginning of the 2000 had to be used, I mean, this is the political branch is complicit in the targeting the civilians.
So then what is your answer? Is Hamas a terrorist organization or only a partly terrorist organization? Which of the two?
This is a very good question, because I would say that now it's more the first. I mean, it used to be a political movement using also terrorist tools, but nowadays I see that there is a shift from the political branch to the military one, in the sense that the military wing is now part of the decisional process.
So now you're saying it's changed or metamorphosed from a political movement which used terrorist tools into a movement that is now better described as a terrorist movement. The terrorism has come to the fore.
That it's a militarized mode. It's a militarized movement more than a political movement nowadays, at least in the Gaza branch.
And is the word terrorism now correctly applied to that military movement?
How can you describe what they did in the Israeli territory?
So you're saying yes. But are you saying yes?
Yes, with the Gaza, like the Gaza branch is more in that dimension. But the problem is that we have to consider the entirety of the Hamas movement. The Hamas movement is not only in Gaza, is not only abroad, is not only in the West Bank. So it's a complex movement that you can't define only in what they did on the 7th of October. Because it would
I think I understand what you're saying, but let me repeat it for the audience. Hamas is a complex movement with branches not just in Gaza, but branches elsewhere. You're willing to accept that the Gaza branch, which has become a militarist branch, is now a terrorist organization, but Hamas elsewhere may not be.
It's very complex also inside Gaza. If we don't contextualize what it happened now in the history of the last 20 years, we don't understand. But not only us, all are overwhelmed by the breaking news instead of pausing 5 minutes and try to understand what happened. In the last 17 years, Gaza was completely blocked, embargoed. The closure started, the very big closure. It was closed also before in 2007 when Hamas did a coup. But it was also in that case the military wing that decided the coup. They controlled from 2007 Gaza. Gaza is a place, a very small place with 2.2 million people, not all Hamas.
So are you saying that the view that the militarist wing in Gaza is now dominantly terrorist needs to be tempered by remembering the history of the last 20 years?
I think that they radicalized inside the closure.
Okay,
they radicalized inside the blocking, the blockade around them.
Let's move on. The one thing that is clear is that a simple, straightforward definition of Hamas as terrorist is one that is, in your eyes, difficult to accept. It applies to different parts of Hamas, to the military wing, but not to the Hamas organizations outside Gaza. And you're also saying when you apply it to the military wing in Gaza, you need to temper that by remembering the history of the last 20 years. Let's leave it for the audience to decide how they interpret the answer you've given. You've shared the complexity and the difficulty of coming to a straightforward conclusion.
Not only this, but there is a political branch inside Gaza too. We can't speak about only a military wing that probably it amounts to 2,000, 3,000 people. What about all the political branch inside Gaza? What about all the people inside Gaza?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, let me ask you a second question. What is Hamas's ideology? What are the principles and goals it stands for?
It stands for a free Palestine. So they don't accept Israel in the region. This started like this. They don't accept the two-state solution. They don't accept the fact that the Israel is there. They decided that they had to confront also inside the Palestinian arena the idea of the the PLO and the Palestinian Authority to compromise with Israel. So they started say we can't compromise with Israel. Palestine will have to be free, and we will use every tool to say this.
When you say they don't accept Israel, do they also stand for physically eliminating the state of Israel?
At the beginning, of course, the confrontation was that one. They evolved also in this case. It's very complicated. They evolved along the years. When we speak about the 1988 foundational charter, it was very clear inside the foundational charter. Along the years, many things changed. And in 2017, they drafted another, and they approved another charter. In this charter, they speak about a border along the they say that the 4th of June 1967, that means the Green Line, but it's a compromise. It's a compromise. So they say Palestine is from the Mediterranean to the Jordan River, from the north to from Ras Nahura to the south at the end of the Gaza Strip. But we compromise about this, and this was really the tricky question along the years.
Let me interrupt there, because you're saying something very important, which is about the manner in which Hamas's attitude to Israel has changed. You're saying in 1987-88, when it came into being, it was opposed to the existence of Israel. It was committed to physically eliminating the state. But in 2017, they altered their charter, and what you call a compromise happened. They're willing to exist side by side with Israel. Is that right? And are they also willing to,
partially,
at the same time, recognize Israel as a state, or simply live beside it without recognizing it?
When I asked the Hamas activists or leaders about this, they said, how can, I mean, they are there. So we say that they exist. They differentiate, of course, between Jews and Israelis. But I mean, we have also to affirm that Palestine is Palestine. And what they did in 2017 is that they changed the wording. They said they changed the language. They started to speak, and they didn't do before, about settler colonialism. I mean, they absorbed the kind of discourse, of global discourse on colonialism, but not at the beginning.
Can I ask you this? Can I ask you this? Because the detail will be very confusing for an Indian audience. Make it simple. Is the change that happened in 2017 substantive and significant, or is it only a change of language?
I think it's significant because it started 10 years before, in 2000 and even in 2005. We were speaking about terrorist attacks at the beginning of the year 2000, but we have also to underline that in 2005, 2006, the international community accepted that Hamas was part of the institutional Palestine. I mean, the Palestinian Authority institutions, and they gave paved the way for Hamas to present as to the Hamas movement to present itself as a party in the elections, in the political elections of 2006.
So you're saying that not only do you believe that the change in the charter that happened in 2017 was significant and important and not just a change of language, but you're also saying side by side, since 2006-7, when Hamas won that election and came to power in Gaza, the international world, the Western world, began to accept Hamas as part of the institutional structure. You're saying both things.
Yes, and I witnessed as a journalist in 2006 the international electoral observers in the elections, in the political elections in the West Bank, in East Jerusalem, and in Gaza, in all the occupied territory. People from Hamas were candidates inside the elections, and the community, the international community, accepted this.
Okay, so then explain this to me. From 2017, when you believe that significant change in the charter of Hamas happened, and Hamas was willing to compromise and coexist with an Israel, did it also at that point say it would recognize Israel as an independent sovereign state, or was it stopping short of that and only agreeing to compromise and live side by side without recognizing?
Stopping short of that.
Okay.
It didn't recognize the permanent history of Israel. It compromised on a temporary settlement.
What has been the attitude of Hamas since 2017 and 2023? Has it continued the policy of 2017, or has it gone back on that?
The problem is Gaza, once again, because when the Netanyahu government in 2011 accepted the agreement on the exchange of prisoners, remember, the prisoners are really central in this story. so the Palestinian prisoners inside the Israeli jail. When Netanyahu and Hamas agreed on the exchange of prisoners, Gilad Shalit, the young soldier, Israeli soldier, free from, he was an hostage for many years inside Gaza. And on the other hand, 1,027 Palestinian prisoners in exchange for Gilad Shalit came back to their houses. Many things changed. The leader of Gaza, of Hamas in Gaza, is Yahya Sinwar. Yahya Sinwar was one of the 1,027 prisoners. And in the case of nowadays, of October 2023, the attack in the Israeli territory had as a goal to take hostages to exchange with the Palestinian prisoners. This is very clear, they said in these days.
Can I just stop you there? Are you saying that a second change began to happen in the character of Hamas and its attitude to Israel when that exchange of prisoners happened in 2010, 2011, as you said, in return for one solitary Israeli soldier in Hamas captivity, 1,027 Hamas prisoners were released, and those released prisoners who'd been in Israeli jails for a long time radicalized Hamas when they returned to Gaza and changed the way Hamas looked at Israel. Is that what you're saying? That is the change that happened in 2010?
Correct. The first part is correct. I would say that they were part of the balance of power, of the change of the balance of power inside Gaza. So Yahya Sinwar emerged as the leader of Hamas in Gaza along the years, starting really from
I understand
2011.
that, but this happened in 2010, and the change in the charter happened 7 years later in 2017.
Yes,
now,
because
since
it's
2017,
complicated.
But since 2017, when Hamas agreed to compromise but stopped short of recognizing, has there been a second change in the attitude to Israel?
No, the problem is that the Hamas is complex. So if we don't speak about the decisional process inside Hamas, we don't understand.
That also means, doesn't it, that we simply don't know the truth about how Hamas views Israel. We know that a change happened in 2010. We know that another change happened in 2017. But thereafter, we don't know how Hamas views Israel.
And something has changed in 2006 also. This is the reason history is very complex, because they changed their attitude along the years, but I think we are making a mistake in our conversation. We are speaking of Hamas without, as a solitary protagonist, without thinking of what has happened around them or inside that territory. If we don't put them inside not a context, but a land also, and put them not only as an actor playing a monologue, but as really a play, we don't understand what happened.
But I'm not sure I understand what you're saying. Can you put it simply and shortly, please?
When I say to you, in 2007, Hamas decided to participate in the political elections in the Palestinian Authority, in the area controlled by the Palestinian Authority, it meant a compromise. When I say to you that they changed the charter, it meant a compromise. But what has happened along the years when this happened to Hamas or inside Hamas? The blockade of Gaza, the killing, the extrajudicial killing of the leaders of Hamas, the confrontation also inside the Palestinian arena, the fragmentation of the Palestinians, also politically, the fracture between Fatah and Hamas. I mean, it didn't change only Hamas, it changed the the land, it changed.
So what was the result of all of that?
The result of all of that is the radicalization of Hamas inside Gaza. The power of Hamas in Gaza, also inside the complex structure that is Gaza, West Bank, abroad, and the prisons.
So in short, the compromises that happened in 2007 and 2017 were partly or fully reversed by the radicalization that happened after 2017.
Also inside the Israeli political arena.
Okay. Now,
because inside the Israeli political arena, the shift was to the right, and the shift was to a right, the far rightist parties that are the settlers inside the West Bank.
Okay. Now, something else happened at the same time as Hamas was radicalizing from the compromise it made in 2007 and 2017. What happened was that Israel, in the last few years, became convinced that Hamas was focused on the development of Gaza and was no longer committed or capable of overthrowing Israel. How serious was that mistake made by the Israelis? Because not only were they misreading Hamas, but they weren't realizing that Hamas was no longer committed to the compromise of 2007 and 2017.
Especially the Netanyahu governments, of Benjamin Netanyahu especially, he didn't want, and he doesn't want, a state of Palestine, or at least he doesn't want a state of Palestine as envisioned in the two-state solution, West Bank, East Jerusalem, Gaza. So he tried to reach a solution or a appeasement and normalization, bringing together the other Arab states, but not the Palestinians. In this vision, Gaza is out of the picture. So the idea is there is the West Bank. The West Bank is a very, very small place with 700,000 settlers, Israeli settlers, and militarily controlled by Israel. East Jerusalem is completely controlled by Israel, and it is detached from the West Bank, and Gaza is out of the picture. The problem for Israel is this. Israel wants, does it want a state of Palestine or not? And this state of Palestine is made of which land? West Bank, and that's all? West Bank and East Jerusalem, or West Bank is Jerusalem and Gaza, the entire, as UN says, Palestinian occupied territory.
But getting a little lost in detail, are you accepting the view that many people believe that just as Hamas was radicalizing and moving away from the compromises of 2007 and 2017, at that same time, Israel made the mistake of believing that Hamas was not a problem and deflected its attention increasingly to the West Bank? Would you accept that was an error made by Israel?
Yes, this is the mistake. The mistake is Gaza is a black hole. Gaza is completely sealed, so it's not a political problem anymore. We can go forward and think about a political settlement with the West Bank.
And this happened at the same time as, in fact, Hamas within Gaza was radicalizing. Israel didn't realize, took its eye off the ball at the wrong time. Just when it should have been on its guard, it dropped its guard.
I think they didn't understand that you can't take 2 million people inside a box.
That I understand. One more quick question before we move further. There are reports that many religious Palestinian-based organizations were funded by the Israelis as a way of counter-checking the secular PLO. I believe that when he was military governor of Gaza, someone called General Segev assisted and helped several religious-based groups. Could he possibly have also been responsible for helping set up, in a small way, Hamas?
You know, I wrote a book about the Social Democratic Party in Italy, and there was this kind of interpretation that the Social Democratic Party was founded by the US, and it was true. I found money. I found money that, I mean, in the documents in the US, I found the money that was funneled to the Italian Social Democratic Party. But is it so important to found a party or to split, in that case, the socialist arena in Italy? I don't think so. And I don't think so also for Hamas. I don't think that Hamas will not appear on the political scene inside the political arena if Israel didn't give some money to some Islamic associations.
So you're confirming that Hamas's founding could not have happened without some sort of helping hand from Israel?
No, I don't confirm so.
But you believe...
I don't confirm it. I think that it's very... I found the traces. I mean, there are also very good Israeli analysts and historians, scholars, who found some traces of this, but they also agree that you can't say that Hamas will not appear in Palestine without the Israeli money that was not channeled to Hamas, but to some Islamic associations.
So what you're saying is you can't confirm any direct connection between Israeli money and Hamas, but it's unlikely that there wouldn't be one, and the money would have been channeled through an Islamic organization not paid directly.
You know, Hamas would not accept the Israeli money.
But do you? I'm asking you as an analyst, what is your point?
I think that they have foundations, they have bases inside the Palestinian population. I think it's a non-argument, this one, because we are looking at the branch and not at the tree.
Okay, then let's move on. Now, do you know, or do you have any specific reasons why Hamas would have launched this massive attack on the 7th of October? And secondly, is there some particular significance beyond the association with the Yom Kippur War why they chose the 50th anniversary?
Really, I don't know. I don't know, but I understood from what I read in these days that also the political branch seems that they don't know. I mean, the political leader like Khaled Meshal and the others, that they, or Ismail Haniyeh, that they didn't know anything about this attack on Israel on the 7th of October.
But forgive me, you're saying something very important. You're saying that the political branch of Hamas, and you named Khaled Meshal, did not know about the attack on the 7th of October until it happened. In other words, the military branch did it on its own without consulting the political branch and acted unilaterally.
This is the idea that many analysts say, and I have to say as an hypothesis that they could be right, that Mohammed Deif and Yahya Sinwar were at the base of this attack, and let
me stop you again. Are you saying that Mohammed Deif, who is the head of the military branch, now virtually controls Hamas? Because if he can override the political branch and do something without even consulting them, then that would suggest he's the ultimate authority.
I think that the political branch political branch outside Gaza is very detached from Gaza. Ismail Haniyeh is abroad. Khaled Meshal is abroad. If something is decided on the military level, I think they would not know anything, and I will tell you why. It used to happen in the previous years. Gilad Shalit, for example, it was a decision of the military branch, the kidnapping Israeli soldier. The same coup in Gaza in 2007, in June 2007, I asked the political leaders inside Gaza, and they told me they didn't know anything about the coup.
So then does this mean that the military branch and Muhammad Daesh, who's the head of it, is the most important branch and he's the most important person?
No, I will not say this. And that we come back to the origin. When I said to you that the decisional process is a very complex one, I forgot to tell you that there are 4 constituencies, so 4 parts inside the structure of Hamas. And they are the constituency of Gaza, the constituency of the West Bank, the constituency of the abroad, that means all the Palestinians who adhere to Hamas in the refugee camps elsewhere, and the prisons. So I don't say to you that there is a military branch, the military constituency inside the political structure, but as far as I understand, in the most recent years, is like if there is a sort of military constituency that is gaining power and power.
Let me make it simpler. How important is Muhammad Daesh, if that's his name, the military head?
The Muhammad Daesh, I don't know, but there's a link between a part of the political branch in Gaza, as far as I understand, and the Qassam brigades.
Okay, let me now ask you a few other questions, and I'll request you for shorter answers. How popular is Hamas in Gaza? We're often told it doesn't represent the Palestinian people, but does it represent the people of Gaza?
Not all the people of Gaza. Not all the people of Gaza. I mean, along the years, the change in Hamas, also in the perception of Hamas, is from a resistance movement to a regime.
Tell me this, if an election were to be held in Gaza today, would Hamas win? I'm talking of a free and fair election, not one where people are intimidated.
It's very difficult. I think it will earn a very consistent amount of votes, but probably will not win. But what about the alternative?
Well, let's not speculate about the alternative. Let's keep our focus on Hamas. What about the Palestinians of the West Bank? How do they view Hamas?
They view Hamas differently because I think not the majority, but there is a sector that views Hamas as a resistance movement.
In Palestinian eyes, and perhaps particularly after what happened on October 7th, has Hamas begun to replace the Palestinian Authority and Fatah as the principal representation of Palestinian aspirations, or would that be wrong to say?
Partially true. Because the weakness of the Palestinian Authority is now, it's now evident, clear, and in the last few days we saw it. We saw also in the manifestations, the demonstrations in the streets of Hebron, Ramallah, Tulkarem, Nablus, and how they were confronted by the security, the Palestinian security. So I think there are 2 weaknesses, the Hamas government one and the Abu Mazen-led Palestinian Authority. There are 2 weaknesses in the Palestinian arena, and we forget another protagonist we don't speak about. And we saw this protagonist in 2021, if you remember the protests in Jerusalem. There was another kind of protest, a very peaceful one, founded based on the request of rights, and many of the people were youth, and they didn't belong to Hamas, Fatah, the Popular Front, none of the factions.
So you're saying an interesting thing. You're saying there is a third. I'm not sure whether the word force is right, but there's a third expression of Palestinian aspiration, which is visible on the streets from time to time. It's neither allied with Hamas nor with Fatah. You're also saying that the popularity of Hamas within Gaza may not be the same as it was when it won that election, because you said it would be unlikely to win another election were a free one to be held today. And you're also saying that there are supporters of Hamas on the West Bank, but they're by no means the majority of the West Bank.
Yes, this is my feeling,
Tell
or
me,
this is my understanding.
Is Hamas misunderstood by the West, or is it correctly understood? Or thirdly, is it only seen through Israeli eyes? Which of the three?
We as Westerners, we don't want to go deep inside the things. We don't want to differentiate, and we did a lot of mistakes. And I'm not the one who says this. Diplomats, politicians along the years, they told me that they made a mistake in 2006. What about trying to root Hamas in a political democratic framework inside the Palestinian Authority? It was a big change at that time, and we were not so brave to lead this change and to help Hamas to, or at least the moderate, let's say the centrist majority of Hamas, to change their attitude.
So you're saying the West missed an opportunity in 2007.
Yes.
If they responded correctly, they could have rooted Hamas within an environment of democratic change that was happening. But by disregarding Hamas, they lost that opportunity.
Yes.
Did they do that? Did they do that under Israeli influence?
Yes, probably, but I think that the responsibility is, is individual and political. You can't blame the others for the decisions you take.
Okay. Now, at the moment, Hamas is locked in a war with Israel. Can this be mediated and resolved? Could Hamas come around once again to the position they were beginning to take in 2017 and accept a two-state solution, even though they don't fully recognize Israel as a sovereign state? Can they come back to that, or is that chapter closed?
I think that chapter is closed. I think it's a very, very, very difficult moment for Hamas. I think they are not reacting the way they could react in the wording. I mean, if you read what or listen to what Khaled Mashal said in the previous days, or Haniyeh, they are stuck on their language, and they don't say anything about their mistakes. I can understand that, this is a wartime, but you have also to deal with the fact that the 7th of October was an extremely, there were war crimes there.
I understand. You're saying that the political leadership, Haniyeh and Khaled Mashal, are stuck. They're unable to change their language, which means also they're unable to change their thinking. Now, we're coming right to the end of this interview, and I've deliberately left this to the end. Can Hamas be obliterated as Israel insists? In other words, is it an idea or is it an organization? An organization can be eliminated. An idea is very difficult to eliminate. Which of the two is Hamas, an organization or an idea?
It's an organization. And I think as an organization, this vision is an idea. When they compare Hamas to ISIS, they fail to understand that Hamas is rooted inside the land, also inside the territory, and that ISIS was not. Was, a top-down hypothesis and realization, but on the ground. But Hamas is another matter of fact. It's a history and is inside the land and inside the population. So how can you obliterate, as as a not as Palestinian. I would understand if the Palestinians would say "Khalas," how it says in Arabic, "Basta, it's enough. I don't want to see any more Hamas in our environment." But how can somebody from another environment say, "I decided that there will be no Hamas inside the Palestinian arena"?
I understand what you're saying. It is impossible for outsiders, i.e. Israel, to obliterate Hamas, no matter how hard they try, how terribly they bomb Gaza. But the Palestinian people themselves, to use that phrase you use, can say, "Khalas, we don't want you anymore." And because Hamas's popularity in Gaza has diminished, do you think that process could continue, or has it been reversed by what happened on October the 7th?
We forget that it's a land under occupation. It's not India, it's not Italy. So we are free in our country. But this is a place under occupation. So also the radicalization of the imaginary is more complicated than in our countries. There is an occupier, there is an occupied.
So to put it simply, this is not the time to look for the Palestinian people to say, "Khalas, we want to change." If that happens, it will happen sometime in the future. At the moment, a land under occupation, facing the possibility of ground invasion by Israel, is likely to solidify behind Hamas rather than turn its back on them.
This is one of the possibilities. Look, this night, a church was bombed inside Gaza. There is a very tiny Christian minority.
I think it was the Greek Orthodox Church.
Yes, correct. So what they can think about the Israelis? Would they blame Hamas? Probably yes, but probably they will blame both of them.
So we end this interview by saying Hamas is very complicated, difficult to understand. It has gone through phases when it's looked, to use a word that may not be accurate, milder and more willing to accept Israel without recognizing Israel. But in the last few years, the signs of compromise of 2017 have been radicalized and reversed. Hamas today, its popularity in Gaza may not be what it was in 2007 when it won an election, but nonetheless, the war situation could have changed things. We need, therefore, to look at Hamas in all its complexity rather than looking to simplify it. I thank you for sharing that complexity with us. It's opened our eyes to things we did not know, even if it's made it more difficult for us to come to simple, easy solutions. Many earlier thought they had a good idea of what Hamas was. You've made it more complex, more complicated, but also more realistic. And sometimes reality is difficult to fully fathom or at least do so easily. That, I would say, is the truth of Hamas. Thank you very much indeed, Paola Caridi.
Thank you for the invitation. I know that it's not so easy to describe, and let's say I did my best.
You did indeed. Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Karan Thapar. Over the last few years, I hope you've been watching my program, The Interview on the Wire. During that period, I've interviewed doctors, politicians, businessmen, scientists, authors, and even the occasional Nobel laureate. For me, it's been exciting. I hope it's been enjoyable for you. But these, as you know, are tough times, and if this program is going to remain bold, independent, and sometimes even defiant, then I think we need your support. At the end of the day, it's a truism, but editorial independence is best defended by the viewers. So if you would like this program to remain the way it is, forthright, outspoken, and interesting, then would you consider supporting us? All you have to do is to click on the description at the bottom. But more than anything else, I hope you will continue to watch The Interview. Your viewership means an awful lot to me.